Our class on the Mishnah Berurah as we continue to delve into the laws of the Shema. We're going to really push very far ahead today. We are very much going to progress through these laws. Interestingly enough, mostly because of the fact that these next few Simanim, these next few chapters are exactly one halacha long. We are going to make a lot of progress today, and that'll put us about halfway through the laws of Shema, which everyone should get excited about. And so today we're going to start off with, so we've been talking about interrupting the Shema. Today we're going to talk about whether or not you recall having recited the Shema. And so the question is, do you have to repeat the Shema or not? We're going to talk a little bit about an interesting question, which is whether or not you have to repeat a mitzvah that you think that you've done, but it's a Torah level mitzvah. So let's go into the law itself and learn a little bit about what is called I can't remember. Case of I can't remembers. It's an interesting type of case. So if you're not sure if you recited the Shema, this is the only halakha here in number 67 in Siman 67, Samach Zion. You must repeat it again. And you must repeat the blessing before it and the blessing after it. But if you know that you recited it, but you just don't remember whether you recited it with or without the blessings beforehand, then you do not have to repeat the blessing. So this is an interesting law. So why does the recitation of the Shema itself predicate itself on the other blessings? Well, let's understand this mitzvah. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, with all other Torah level commandments, so the Torah commands you to do something. If you were not sure whether you did it or not, okay, we learned by the laws of tzitzis, this is in 17:3, that for somebody for whom their person, what is known as halachically the tumtum, someone who is doubtful as to whether they are male or female, they just don't know. They are unable, because of a large covering of skin, they can't identify themselves as either male or female, therefore known as tumtum, and they are obligated to wear tzitzis. Another case like this that the Mishnah brings is a case of circumcision. By the case of an androgynous. The androgynous has androgynos, as it's written, but we pronounce it as androgynous in sort of the Anglicized version of it. So that means that they display both male and female parts. They have to get a circumcision since they have the male part. And he says, Mishnah Berurah, v'chein kol kihai gavni. Okay, in every single case like this, you won't make a blessing on a case of where you're not sure if you are obligated on a Torah level. Why? Well, because the blessings themselves are rabbinic, and the blessing is only a rabbinic requirement. So you must do the mitzvah because that type of thing, that type of doubt, is the chumrah, is a case of stringency where you should do the activity out of doubt. But the blessing itself can be a leniency, meaning to omit the blessing, to be lenient, because you don't want to recite God's name in vain. So now that we should know that there are people who disagree if the mitzvah is in doubt, like those cases that I just mentioned, or the question is you don't know if you did the mitzvah at all. So there's a difference between knowing whether or not there's an obligation versus not knowing whether or not you fulfilled your obligation. Those are two different types of doubt. So it would seem reasonable that if you're not sure if you did the mitzvah, that the blessing should, if you're redoing the mitzvah, you should be doing the blessing. Okay, so, for example, if you have a lulav in the shofar on day 1, where this Torah level commandment, everyone knows, okay, and you're not sure if you did the mitzvah, then you must do it again with the blessing according to this opinion. The Mishnah brings down the opinion of the Pri Megadim that says, Mikol Makom, however you look at it, that since there are a number of people who quote a number of decisors of poskim that disagree with that this distinction, and one should always refrain from reciting a blessing when one is redoing a mitzvah, or doing a mitzvah out of doubt, no matter what the doubt is. Okay? And you should always do if you're not sure, always do the mitzvah and never make a blessing. And so too, for example, if you definitely haven't done the mitzvah yet, and someone brings you a lulav or a shofar on the first day of Yom Tov, and it is after sunset, but before the stars come out, you shouldn't also make a blessing. Now let's talk about Kriya Shema for a second. So that's understanding how suffix works. For Kriya Shema, we say that it's a Torah level mitzvah, and therefore it's considered a doubtful performance of a mitzvah. So we say that when you're not sure who did it, then you should say it again with all the blessings. Okay, this is assuming you should do the whole thing again unless you are really close to the time of Kriya Shema. If the time of the Shema has already passed, then this rule would not apply because you no longer have a Torah level doubt, you have a rabbinic level doubt. Just the rabbis required you after the time of Shema would be later. Okay, but that's not the case in terms of making mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And since we're reminding ourselves of the exodus from Egypt is another one of the mitzvahs that are performed afterwards, therefore one should have to say the second blessing, Emes V'Yatziv, all the way until the end of the 4th hour, because that's when we're obligated to recite morning prayers. And we learned this halacha in 58. Okay, so we said that over there. And after that time, there's no reason to recite the blessing. But some people were lenient and allowed us to recite the blessing even later, as we learned in that same Siman as well, 758. And one other thing over here, if you recited Psukei Zimra and you recited the Shir HaSayam, the Song of the Sea, Az Yashir Moshe, that would also fulfill the obligation, but you would have to have in mind to have your obligation fulfilled through its recitation. Okay, and a number of people will agree with that. Some people are curious about whether you can just think about if that fulfills the obligation. We learned earlier that we don't like that. Another thing to think about also is at nighttime you also have to recite Yetzias Mitzrayim, so you would also have to recite the second blessing again there as well, the third blessing, and not the 4th one. And that would be reciting it all night long before the morning comes. And some people are wondering if you recited Mariv after Shkia but before 3 stars came out, so after sunset before the stars come out, if you have to have another do-over. So we wait until the nighttime. Okay, and so some people say that you should still be strict about it. So the Mishnah Berurah also discusses over here which part of Shema is considered the Torah level one. We mentioned some of this discussion earlier. Whether the first line is the Torah requirement or the first paragraph is. Okay, and the second one is. So the main way to look at it is that every time you recite the Shema, you are also to include its blessings as well. So there's other cases of that. So if you know that you recited the first line of the Shema, okay, or you recited the whole first paragraph of the Shema, and you're not sure if you recited the whole rest of it, then you do not have to go back. Okay, and what we said previously in chapter 64, in halacha 3 and 4, we would seem to imply that you would have to go back, because that seems to be the way that the rabbis of the Talmud made this rule. They have to go back. So if you're not sure if you recited the third paragraph of Shema, it refers to tzitzis, and you're not sure if you recited the third blessing of the morning, which is emes v'yatziv. So if you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis, you have to go back for that as well, as we just mentioned. Okay. All right, so that is the end of 67. Let's go on to 68. Siman 68. There's one halakha here in 68. The halakha over here is not to interrupt the recitation of the blessings of the Shema with piyutim. So what does this mean? So the Shulchan Aruch said there are certain places where they interrupt or they interlope the blessings of the Shema with liturgical poems, known as piyutim. He says, however, one should refrain from saying them, because they might be considered an interruption. That is the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Ramah over here, this is very important. The Yevish Shomrim, the Ramah says, and some people say that there is no such prohibition. And such is our custom. In every single place that they have this custom, it's common, and there is no reason not to say them. And if you don't say them, there's no loss. Nonetheless, you should not use that as an opportunity to divert your attention from the prayers itself, even to learn Torah. Okay, because as long as you're reciting the piyutim, the liturgical poems, you're in the middle of the Shema. You also can't speak while they're learning it. So if someone is learning in their head, like they're thinking about, they're reciting the Mishnah themselves quietly, not reciting it out loud, and you're looking at a book, so there's really no prohibition to think about things, even though you're in the middle of the blessings, because thinking is not the same as saying something. But we don't really want you to do that, because you'll lose your focus and probably speak, and then you'll have broken up the blessing of the Shema by speaking. So therefore, a person should never remove themselves from what the community is doing in a place that has a custom to recite these liturgical poems. And see later on in Siman 90, 10, and we'll discuss this further. He discusses about reciting the piyutim there in the Shemona Esrei. So the common custom of the Ashkenazi world was to recite them. Okay, so let's look at the Mishnah over here. So he says that the Ramah says that there is no prohibition. So the reason why we say that is because the Talmud itself has said that in a place where you were said to make it long, you cannot make it short, and where it was told to make short, you can't make it long, referring to blessings that we learned about this earlier. Bracha Arucha and Bracha Ketzara. So if a blessing opens up with Baruch and ends with Baruch, you cannot make it shorter, and vice versa. So therefore, people can add the piyutim in the middle of long brachos. They didn't say how long you had to make it, so if you wanted to add more words to it, that's fine. Okay, which is something that the Shulchan Aruch himself disagrees with. But you always have to begin the same way and end the same way. Okay, so as long as it basically follows the proper intention of the blessing, which in these cases is to make mention of the Exodus from Egypt and the build up to the Shema and the God's creation of the world. Okay. And so there he goes into a very long discussion over here of other places like this. We won't take up too much time with that. So we say that it's important to stay in consonance with the community, what they're doing. And so even if you have finished reciting the blessing and the community is still reciting the liturgical poems, so one should not break from that to go ahead and start learning. Okay? And also the other problem is that people will see you not paying attention and they'll think, oh, I also don't have to do this. So in that case, maybe you'll be setting a bad example. So the main thing is that every person, even if you're sitting quietly and listening, that will be acceptable. So some people say, the Mishnah brings down, that the Reb Chaim Vital wrote in the name of the Ari, that the only piyutim they would say were those that were written by Reb Elazar HaKalir. We've mentioned him in other classes before, because he had a special connection because of the magic cookie that he ate. That's why he's called HaKalir, because he ate the cookie. And it gave him a special connection to reciting liturgical poems. Okay, and it says how certain things that the Ari didn't say certain things. And it says that Reb Chaim Vital talks that about his father, that on the days of awe, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, he used to say all of the viduis. I used to say all of the confessions. And he used to recite all of the enacted liturgical poems. And so therefore, that's what one should not, therefore we see from his father, one should not change that. And also, in the Sefer Shnei Luchos Bris of Rabbi Yitzchak Horowitz, another very influential Kabbalist who had a lot of influence on 16th and 17th century, 16th, 17th century prayer practices in Ashkenazi synagogues, that it's really a mitzvah to say these things. And so, especially when they came from Elazar HaKalir, and also the other ones who wrote and contributed to these things. So things that are the main part of the tefillah you shouldn't change, and whatever is the custom of your community you should keep. So, for example, people who are changing from Nusach Ashkenaz to Sfar because have changed countries and vice versa, that's when you're allowed to change the piyutim. Okay. And let's see, they go on a little bit about this, but we're going to go. There's a lot in here where they talk about different types of piyutim. We won't go into all of the specifics, but just know for a fact that these are important things to say. Okay, 69 over here. This is the rule that's known as Pores al HaShema. Pores al HaShema means someone who has gone ahead and set themselves up as a leader just to recite the Shema. So let's talk about what this is. So the Shulchan Aruch says, if there are certain people who have prayed by themselves and they did not hear the Kaddish or the Kedusha, then what they are permitted to do is to recite the Kaddish and the Kedusha with one person taking the lead. And they recite Kaddish, the one that you would say after Psukei Zimra. You will recite Baruch Hu, and then you will recite the first blessing of the Shema, which is the blessing known as Yotzer Or. And this is it. And this is called Pores al HaShema, which means, the Shulchan Aruch says, which is to cut a piece from the Shema, because you're only reciting part of it, and it's meant to help you fulfill your obligation for praying in the congregation. And the Ramah says here, and now we do not have this custom. We don't say the blessing of Yotzer Or at all. All we say is Kaddish and Baruch Hu, and then everyone responds to that. Some people say that you can do this Pores al Shema thing for the evening prayer just like you could in the morning prayer. However, we don't do that because there is no Kaddish before Baruch Hu of the evening according to Ashkenazi practice. In the Sephardic practice, they do have a Kaddish before that, but not in Ashkenazi practice. The Shulchan Aruch continues, after you have finished the blessing of Yotzer Or, you then immediately hop into the Shemona Esrei. You say the first blessing, the second blessing, and the third blessing, and then you continue with Nekadesh, or Nakdi Shach, depending on which Nusach you're holding up, Ashkenazi or Sephardi. And then you finish that off, the fourth blessing, with Atah Kadosh. And that is considered Over Lifnei HaTeva. That's the second part of this, which is basically passing yourself before the prayer stand, or the lectern. Okay, we call it the Amud. Okay? And you cannot do this with less than 10, because these are considered Devarim Sheba Kedusha, things that are only recited with a minyan. And you must find at least 6 people that have not yet heard the Baruch Hu prayer. So as long as most of them have not heard it, and you still need 10. However, if you can't find that, then you should not recite it. And even someone who has heard these things already is allowed to lead the priest al Shema. They could lead this part of the service, and they could say the short Shema and the short Shemona Esrei to get the Dvarim Kedusha, even if it's just for one person, as long as they haven't heard it yet. Nonetheless, if that one person who hasn't heard it yet knows these things himself, it's preferable that he do these things, doing the short Shema and the short Shemona Esrei. And then that person is preferable to finding someone else who's done it already. The Ramah adds over here, someone who goes ahead to lead the congregation and recites the 3 blessings of the Shemona Esrei. They should finish the entire Shemona Esrei and not pause, unless or even if they have already prayed. However, the other people who have already prayed, they can stop immediately after the first 3 blessings and after the Kedusha. And this is even applicable if the person who is leading has himself not said the Shemona Esrei. And so he should go ahead and finish this entire prayer. Even though afterwards he'll have to go ahead and repeat the Shema. And has not even said the blessings yet to do Geula Tefillah, but he was there to recite this. It's prohibited, the Ramah further adds, to speak in this time period. Okay, once you've recited the blessings between the end of Shema and the beginning of Shemona Esrei, or within Kriya Shema or its blessings itself. And therefore, it's also prohibited for a Shliach Tzibur to take a break between Kriya Shema and the Tefillah, or between Kriya Shema and its blessings, even to go ahead and do this little favor of doing Porus al Shema for other people. Even if it's for after the community itself has finished praying, okay, and they've already said Kaddish and Baruch Hu, and the Shliach Tzibur has started with the Berurah of Yotzer Or, so you can't take a break to do this for them. However, with the evening prayer, which is not as strict as the daytime prayers, one could actually go ahead and pause their own prayer and allow them to recite the Shemona Esrei. And so allow yourself to recite Baruch Hu again. There's no Shemona Esrei in the evening. Nonetheless, any other person who could do it would be preferable, even to recite the entire Shemona Esrei with another 10. Even inside that same shul where they have already gone ahead and led the services and fulfilled everyone's obligations. But they didn't have a chazan, didn't have anyone to lead the congregation. In the second place of where the first person was leading the congregation. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because that looks like there was something wrong with the first person. Because it feels like the first person didn't fulfill everyone's obligations. And the Ramah adds further, so that would only be in a case where the first group of people praying are still in the synagogue, but they have just recently finished their entire group, but they haven't left. Okay, if they have left, then you could have another minyan right after them in the same place where the first person was leading it. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this halakha. A lot going on. So let's see what we can cover over here. Okay, so let's see what we can go ahead and cover. There's just a lot going on here. So this whole rule, Berurah explains, of repeating the Shema is some people recite the Shema by saying Baruch Hu because of people who come late to the synagogue. And they've already finished the entire Shemona Esrei that's been recited quietly. Some people have the custom where this custom of doing a partial Shema is done by the person leading the congregation. And they do this, they have this again after the final Kaddish that is recited after you finish Shemona Esrei and Tachanun. And these people who come in, who come in late like this, we already said in 54, before they recite the Kaddish again, they have to say at least 3 psukim if they want to recite the Kaddish and Baruch. Okay, the only time that we're really picky about these people is if they come late on Shabbos and Yom Tov, because they should have already been there by the time Torah service has started. However, there is no reason to stop people who have this custom to add the additional Baruch Hu, because they don't want to start a fight. But in a place where that's not a problem, you could say that you would want to have it where the person who leads the services won't say Baruch Hu again. Someone else from the congregation should do it, especially that person themselves came late. And furthermore, if they have a case where you are already you already started reciting Yotzer Or, then you could for that person go ahead and recite the Baruch Hu for them, even though they're already in the middle of it, and they could respond to it. Okay, even though they're in the middle of it and they're going to be praying by themselves. And right now they have 10. So you would be allowed to go ahead and lead a Baruch Hu just for them and let them go ahead and continue the blessing. Okay. Now, some people say, so the Shulchan Aruch said that each person may go ahead and recite the Shema when they all get together. Now, the Radvaz disagrees with this opinion. And so he says that if you already have recited the Shemona Esrei, you can no longer do this. Okay, and so therefore you're not allowed to go ahead and say the Shema, say the Kedusha afterwards. Your mitzvah is completed and it's left to you. So that's what he holds. So a lot of people bring this down, but some people say that the law should be like the Shulchan Aruch. So some Sofer says the following, that people follow the opinion of the Radvaz. However, there's one exception, and even for the Radvaz, if there is one person who has not yet recited Shemona Esrei, that person can go ahead and organize 9 other people for them to go ahead and recite the Baruch Hu, and also to go ahead and recite the Shema. Okay, and so the other things that we've changed nowadays are that one person can go ahead at the end and just recite the Baruch Hu without reciting Yotzer Or, and you go ahead and recite it, and then other people hear it. Okay, and so that's all part of the main blessing, and that's even if everybody's gone ahead and recited the Shemona Esrei already and recited the blessings of Shema already. So, if there is somebody who hasn't prayed Mariv now, then they could go ahead and request that 9 other people stay with them in order for them to recite Baruch Hu and also recite the first blessing of Shema, and that would be permitted. And even you could even ask them to wait until you to finish to recite the whole Kaddish. Okay, we will hold it here today because there's a lot of Mishnah Berurah to go through, and we will actually pick up with halachas with 70, Siman 70 next time. Thank you everyone for coming out, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.